As a kid, one of my favourite films to watch was The Incredibles. Made in 2004, the year I was born in, by the way. The Incredibles came out. The film has an amazing story, well-written characters, cool designs, cool locations, and is a phenomenal film, and I will always consider it to be at the top of Pixar's best, along with Ratatouille. Hell, I even went to see The Incredibles on Disney on Ice and got this massive plushie of the big man himself, Bruce. So yeah, Pixar really outdid themselves with this film. But then they caught an incurable disease of sequelitis and made sequel after sequel for each classic film they made to, let's just say, varying degrees of success. So when I heard about The Incredibles 2 being in development and then seeing the trailer years later, I was hyped. The models looked almost identical and better compared to their originals, except for the fact that Violet looks like me after my weekend of all-nighters playing Minecraft. But besides that, this movie looked hype. Then it came out and me and my family went to see it while on holiday in England. And I liked it. Now that it's been years since I saw the film, my opinion has vastly changed. While I originally liked the film, my opinions on the movie have soured. Now, by no means do I mean the movie is bad. It still has these really good characters, but there's problems with them. Mr. Incredible really wants to see his wife fail in this film. They use the man not being used to being in the passenger seat plot device, but it just makes Bob so much more unlikable. He feels almost the same as the original, but feels off. Dash's character feels almost completely different. Not in terms of Dash himself, but his motivations. Dash in Incredibles 2 is a nuisance because he's a kid. That's the reasoning. In the original film, Dash is a nuisance because he wants to prove himself. When he places tacks on the teacher's chair, it isn't to be a prick. It was to prove to himself that he can do it so fast that no one in the class would notice. He wants to reach his fullest potential, but since supers are illegal, he can't do that. So whenever he acts out in the original film, it's almost always tied to his motivations of being the best he can be. The only other times he's annoying is to his sister, and that's just Dash being a sibling. Whereas in this film, Dash just wants to bring chaos. Jack is the minions of this movie. He's all over the marketing, and it feels like they wanted to make a Jack Attack 2 film with the amount of focus that they put on him, rather than, I don't know, making a better villain or something. As for Elastigirl and Violet, they both pretty much act identical to the original. Violet's a bit more interesting, but besides that, they're pretty much identical. Now I'm going to say something that I like about the film before I get into the negatives. I like how this film conveyed the setting better. In the original, it kind of forgot that it took place in the 60s, whereas this film is aggressively 60s. I like the animation. Winston's cool too, I guess. Frozone is really good in this movie. As always, the soundtrack is really good with this film. It's kind of a standard with this series, but I really like the soundtrack. It's really good. That's about it. Now, onto the negatives. This will go into spoiler territory, so if you don't want to see spoilers, skip to this timestamp in the video, I guess. 3, 2, 1, spoilers. The villain of this film has to be one of my biggest problems with this film. Her motivations make absolutely no sense. The reason she wants supers to stay illegal is because her father and mother were both getting robbed, and her father called for the supers instead of going to the safe room, leading to the burglars killing him. Her belief is that people rely too much on supers instead of themselves. But couldn't you make that same argument for law enforcement? Why aren't you also trying to get rid of law enforcement? Why doesn't she just want anarchy? She blames the supers even though it wasn't the supers' problem. Even if they were legal, they wouldn't have made it in time. He would have died anyway. It was his own fault. That was his mistake. And of course, Evelyn is yet another twist villain. That's what's disappointing about the film. If you thought you knew who was going to be the villain, then you most likely knew. Winston, of course, being the obvious red herring. In my opinion, Syndrome was an outstanding villain. He was well defined and his motives made sense. Evelyn has none of that. And to top it all off, she makes supers legal again, defeating herself in the end. Her plan was to make them illegal by first making them legal to make them illegal. Again? Why not, just keep them illegal? The designs of the new heroes also aren't the best. They're fine, but could have been much better. The new characters themselves are also pretty bland, bar Void, who has moments where it seemed her character was going somewhere. I feel if she had more screen time, her character would have been better. Here's my idea of a final act that could have easily fleshed out the character of Void. She should have teamed up with Elastigirl or Violet after Violet freed her from the mind control device in the final act. That would have been cool, but no. The action in this film was also quite boring. The first movie had some cool fight scenes, like Bob versus the Omni Droider, the family fighting together for the first time. but scenes like the fight against the Underminer, bear in mind, a fight that has been hyped up for a decade at this stage, and the climax of the film were underwhelming. Overall, this film was just void, no pun intended, of a lot of what made the original so great. I'd love to talk about the original at some point on this channel because it genuinely is one of the best things Pixar has ever produced. This movie could have been great if Pixar just cared more, but it seems like with every one of these sequels, they just care about making the animation better and nostalgia baiting first, and making a good story second. So yeah, that's what I think of Incredibles 2. Before I go, I want to briefly speak about Bao, the short that played before this film. It is the perfect example of Pixar perfection. It was funny, heartbreaking, and emotional, and by the end I was mesmerized not only by the storytelling, but also the animation and its unique and creative style. I would highly recommend you watch it. It's great to see an Asian woman directing something as great as this, especially after the allegations of how Pixar treats women and minority creators. So yeah, that's my opinions on The Incredibles 2. Thank you for watching. Go check out my new podcast, What's the Buzz, on Spotify. I've recently posted a new episode. Go check out my Twitch. Thank you guys for watching, and have a good one.